Do14 is on the posterior midline, below the spinous process of C7 in a depression. Bladder 11 is 1.5 cm lateral to the posterior midline, below the spinous process of T1. Going to find the inferior border of T1 and come directly lateral to it on the height of the paraspinal muscle.
Small intestine 9 is located on the posterior aspect of the shoulder, about 1 cm superior to the posterior axillary crease. How do you find this 1 cm? Well, it's important to place this point inferior to the inferior border of the deltoid. To bring this into relief, the person can push their arm backwards. You're feeling for a nice soft area below the muscle. It's important to remember that when you finally locate this point, you need to be completely parallel to the part of the body you're working on. Small intestine 9. Small intestine 10 is located on the posterior aspect of the shoulder. It's directly superior to the posterior axillary crease and inferior to the lateral extremity of the spine of the scapula. Find small intestine 9, come straight up, feel for the spine of the scapula, and then come back down into a nice dip to find this point. You're not on the bone and you're not on the deltoid, you're in a nice dip. It's important to remember that to find this point accurately, you need to be standing parallel to the part of the body that you're working on. Small intestine 13 is located in a depression superior to the medial end of the spine of the scapula. It's about 1 cm medial and slightly inferior to small intestine 12. Palpate along the superior border of the spine of scapula until you find a nice dip at its medial end. Be careful that you don't palpate too far, because you will fall off the scapula and find another dip, but it's not small intestine 13. Small intestine 14 is located 3 cm lateral to the inferior border of T1. Locate your T1, move 3 cm laterally. The 3 cm at this level is dictated by the medial border of the scapula. Small intestine 15 is located 2 cm lateral to the inferior border of C7. Locate your C7, use the medial border of the spine of scapula to dictate your 3 cm mark, move out 2 cm to find this point. Large intestine 15 is located anterior and inferior to the acromion process at the origin of the deltoid muscles. The easiest way to find this point is to take the weight of the person's arm, extend their arm, and palpate for the clefts between the anterior, lateral and posterior heads of the deltoid. If you push medially, you should be able to feel the bony extremity of the acromion process. You need to locate this point inferior to the acromion process between the anterior and lateral heads of the muscle. Mark this point when the arm is then relaxed.
Stomach 14 is in the first intercostal space, 4 cm lateral from the midline.
To locate gallbladder 20, palpate up the groove in between the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscles. As you get to the base of the occiput, you will find a nice depression. Gallbladder 20 is in the centre of that depression. Bladder 10 is located 1.3 sun lateral to DO15. It's 4.5 sun from DO15 to the mastoid process. So divide this area into 3 and just come a little closer to the posterior midline. You'll be on the lateral edge of the trapezius muscle.
Large intestine 4, you're going to find the length of the second metacarpal bone. So running your finger down, finding the base, making sure that you're not actually on the carpal bones themselves, finding the midpoint of that shaft of bone, coming between the first and second metacarpals, nearer to the second than the first in the muscle. Large intestine 5 in the anatomical snuff box. Going to ask Laurie to extend his thumb under resistance, and that brings the snuff box into relief. And just relax. Going to articulate the wrist to find the deepest part of the hollow now it's relaxed. And I'm going to put my point in, which is in between the two tendons of extensor pollicis longus and brevis.
Large intestine 10 is located 10 sun proximal to large intestine 5 on a line heading towards large intestine 11. Palpate along that line and fall into a nice groove in the muscle at 10 sun. Large intestine 11 is located at the midpoint between lung 5 and the prominence of the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. Typically, this is at the end of the transverse cubital crease when the arm is fully flexed. Large intestine 14 is located on a line joining large intestine 11 to large intestine 15. It's often described as being 3/5 of the distance between large intestine 11 and large intestine 15, but this isn't always very accurate. The best way to find it is to have a person adduct their arm against pressure and then palpate down until you find a nice depression on the inferior aspect of the deltoid muscle. It's important to realise that when the arm is relaxed, this point isn't at the exact tip of the deltoid, it's slightly anterior and slightly superior on a line joining these 2 points. Small intestine 13 is located in a depression superior to the medial end of the spine of the scapula. It's about 1 sun medial and slightly inferior to small intestine 12. Palpate along the superior border of the spine of scapula until you find a nice dip at its medial end. Be careful that you don't palpate too far, because you will fall off the scapula and find another dip, but it's not small intestine 13. Small intestine 14 is located 3 sun lateral to the inferior border of T1. Locate your T1, move 3 sun laterally. The 3 sun at this level is dictated by the medial border of the scapula.
Heart 1 is in the centre of the axilla. You need to locate this point by abducting the arm. This brings the pectoralis major muscle into relief. The point in the centre of the axilla is posterior to this pectoralis major muscle, but not on the torso. It's where the arm and the body join. Heart 3 is at the medial aspect of the elbow, midway between the medial epicondyle of the humerus and pericardium 3. So coming midway between those 2 points and the medial aspect of the transvercubital crease. Heart 7, which is at the flexor aspect of the wrist joint, at the proximal border of the pisiform bone, the radial to this flexor carpal ulnaris tendon. In order to bring this tendon into relief, if you get the patient to put their thumb and their little finger together, that will bring that tendon up. And just relax. Articulate the wrist and pop your point in. Pericardium 6 is on the flexor aspect of the forearm. It's 2 sun proximal from pericardium 7, and it's in between the 2 tendons palmaris longus and flexor carpal radialis. Pericardium 7 is on the flexor aspect of the wrist. It's level with heart 7 and between 2 tendons, palmaris longus and flexor carpal radialis. Some people don't have this palmaris longus tendon, in which case you'd just be going ulnar to this flexor carpal radialis. So finding heart 7, articulate the wrist, coming between those 2 tendons, that if you can't see them, you can get the person to join their thumb and their little finger together, and that will highlight those 2 tendons. And just relax again.
Small intestine 4 is on the ulnar aspect of the hand, in this nice depression between the base of the 5th metacarpal and the triquetral bone, which is this palpable bone on the ulnar aspect of the wrist. Small intestine 3 is on the ulnar aspect of the hand. It's in a depression which is proximal to the head of the 5th metacarpal. It's in between the metacarpal bone and the muscle, and it typically lays on a level with the distal palmar crease.